We have, of course, the Executive Director of the Content Forum, Ms. Madiha Mahmood. Hi.
Hi, hello.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning.
And congratulations as well. Let me just first say that on the new position.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just been a little over 6 months already.
All right. How has it been so far?
Good. So far, so good. Very exciting times we live in. I mean, you guys have established it very well. Social media is where most of us get our content these days, so the landscape has changed.
Okay, but the thing is, the question here right now is, how has it changed and what kind of impact are we talking about these days where everything is just made available online and the number of users have been increasing, so on and so forth? Is it actually worrying or it's, okay?
It's fantastic. I mean, for me, social media is a great addition to our lives. Like you said, we never could have went shopping online before, but we can do that now. And social media, it doesn't just connect us, it influences in ways we would have never imagined. But with that comes certain challenges that we need to be careful of and certain risk as well. So I think that's the area that we should be looking at.
Right. And I actually want to know, when we talk about self-regulation, right, what does self-regulation mean?
All right, self-regulation, it essentially means what it says. It's how you regulate yourself based on the rules that you have set for yourselves. And I'll just bring you to how content is regulated, right? So self-regulation in terms of content is where we have the content forum where we are with players who are broadcasters, advertisers, content creators, and we all come together. We know how our operations work, how the industry works, and we establish a code which has the guidelines and best practices for us to comply with. So self-regulation is a lot more flexible and adaptable. It complements legislation, and like legislation, which needs to go through meticulous processes and tabled in Parliament, self-regulation is a lot more flexible, and it fills policy gaps that arise from all these new developments in technology.
Right, okay. And coming from you, who have like solid expertise in self-regulatory, but the question is right now, is there such thing that, when one consumes social media, that they get addicted to it without even them realizing it? So with that being said, how does self-regulatory come into this picture? And as a end user like you and me and Zoe and the rest of the world, are we supposed to tell ourselves, look, I have to only consume this amount of time, of social media, and just put it aside when the time, when it's needed?
I think we can all answer that ourselves. I mean, you're all social media users. I'm a social media user. And you kind of know how addicted you are to it or how reliant you are on it by how fast or how quickly you open a social media app once you wake up. Do you immediately go to Twitter? Do you immediately check your likes on Instagram? Do you immediately go to all the news feeds that you get? Or what's the first thing you do? You open your WhatsApp groups. So yes, we are definitely reliant on social media. And like any other media that you consume, there should be a self-acknowledgement or self-realization of how much you're using it, how well you're using it, and how you should control yourselves. And that's exactly what self-regulation is all about. You need to be aware of your usage and your consumption of the content. If it's getting detrimental to you, then you need to utilize the unfollows, the blocks, and everything else that's out there that the social media platforms themselves offer to you.
I like the part where, the block is highlighted and it gives emphasis on this. But Zoe, do you block people or,
No, I totally agree, especially with the amount of content we are consuming now, right?
Yeah.
We're consuming content left and right.
Right.
And the content that we consume, even for myself as an adult, sometimes I see content that are a little bit PG-18,
Okay.
They're a little bit too sexualized. And especially, it concerns me, at 28 years old, seeing 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, sometimes even as young as 10-year-olds are starting to act like adults on social media. So, Nadia, how do we regulate, as parents, right? How do we regulate their social media usage in making sure that whatever they post, if they choose to post online, and if we give permission to post online, it is age appropriate?
I think parents need to be very much aware of what social media platforms there are out there and realize that these social media platforms all come with different usages for their teens. They don't use it, the younger generation, they don't use it the way adults do, for example. And you need to know what's on your kids' app, on your kids' phones, the apps that they have, and understand that each of them have their TNCs, have their restrictions, and there are age restrictions as well. Even Instagram has age restrictions, though not many people do comply with it. So I think parents, well, the first thing they need to do is to always establish that relationship with your children and always establish the open lines of communication. So they tell you about their activities online, the behaviors online, and you can take that extra step and learn about those platforms and maybe highlight the dangers in these platforms to your children.
Right.
I think one of the examples that Zoe gave, for example, like Instagram, I see quite a few youngsters who are really sometimes I suspect they're not even in double digits yet, who are already handling their own social media accounts, and they get peer pressured into doing things or posting things that they know they shouldn't, or maybe they don't know they shouldn't, but their parents definitely should know it's happening. And their parents really need to step in.
Yeah, when parents step in, how do they, ensure that they just don't breach their privacy?
Privacy. I think, well, for myself, speaking as a parent, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that the older children or our teenagers are young adults. And the way we treat our children need to be adapted to their age.
Right.
So when they're young, when they're primary school age, for example, yes, you need to be more supervisory in nature. You need to monitor them. And, the level of maturity needs to be looked at as well. But once they're older, they need to be treated more like the young adults that they are, because we are letting them out in a few years' time to go into the real world, right? Yeah. And they are young adults. And we also need to remember how it felt when we were teenagers, right?
Yeah.
So, it's really hard being a teenager these days. The peer pressure is now called FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. The things that you don't think you should do, if all your friends are doing it, you think it's okay. But going back to the issue of privacy, I have a 15-year-old son.
Right.
And he has his own mobile device. But with that mobile device comes rules.
Yeah.
So, for example, after the sign-off time, the device stays with me. I have access to the phone. I know the passcode. And he knows I have every right to go through his phone if I want to. But so far, he has never blocked me out of it. And so far, I've never had the reason to go through his messages, for example, because I remember being a teenager, and during that time, no WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
But I would have been mortified if my parents were to eavesdrop in my chats with my friends. And not because I had anything horrible to hide, but come on, teenagers, right? So we need to establish being able to monitor the children, establishing boundaries and expectations, but also giving them some of that independence that they very much crave.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember when I was growing up, anything I had to do with my parents, if I had to report something, I get super duper embarrassed, even though it's something that perhaps is very normal or, as a teenager, you have this sense of wanting to have independency and so on and so forth, right? So I'm going to go backtrack a little bit, because in the beginning you talked about legislations, and we want to talk about the law aspect, the legal aspect of using social media, and how can we self-regulate, right? So the content forum, what does the content forum actually do, and how do they actually regulate the content that is being put out there, or the content that's being shared and viewed and forwarded in WhatsApp messages and so on and so forth?
Okay. So the thing about the content forum that a lot of people sometimes have misapprehensions or confusion about is that we're often mistaken for regulators like MCMC. We are registered under the Communications and Multimedia Act. We are registered under MCMC, but we are an industry self-regulatory organization, which means that our members are broadcasters and advertisers, content creators. And what we do is we help to complement this legislation by having these guidelines, a content code, which has everything in there. You've got regulations on how to treat content for women, how to treat advertising, how to treat content for children. What is, in the Communications and Multimedia Act, they say you can't put in any contents that's offensive or indecent or obscene. But what is indecent? What is obscene? So the code handles that. And the great thing about it is because the industry players themselves made this code, their compliance in it is very high because you're very invested in having that code work. And we've got a complaints bureau within the content forum where if let's say you're an advertiser of a brand and you see your competitor doing something wrong, You can use the Complaints Bureau to lodge your complaint, or even have mediation or advisory services there as well. So for social media, same thing. Everything that's in the content code is applicable as well on other platforms such as social media.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I never knew.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And moving back to self-regulatory, right? Putting yourselves in the shoes of teenagers these days, as a teenager, Zoe, and how and what can we do, right, to ensure that we just don't move away from basic principle and moral? I mean, sometimes you just don't realize that you're not doing it. Sometimes you just you don't realize that you're doing something unnecessary. Putting yourself back in the shoes of a teenager, how do you put that wall there and to ensure that you just don't go out there baseless and unnecessary?
I haven't been a teenager for over a decade, almost 4 decades. But what I do remember that being a teenager, independence and autonomy is a big thing.
Yeah.
So is peer pressure.
Yeah.
But the most important thing I think for teenagers out there is that you need to be able to engage with your parents, or if not your parents, then other trusted adults. Because as much as teenagers think that, pretend I'm a teenager. As much as we think we know everything, we really don't. And the adults that are around us, from the benefit of their age and experience, they may be able to see red flags that you don't. And it's very important as well to have established that relationship with the adults, because when teenagers are with their own circle, the things that they all agree is okay or not okay tends to be a bit black and white. So it really is very important for there to be awareness on what's out there. For example, cyberbullying.
Yeah.
I mean, in schools, you get a small circle of bullies. You actually can identify who they are, and they walk around as a gang of bullies. But online, you can gather a whole wave of bullies from people who don't even know you, but because they feel that they can relate to the bullies, or they feel that they too want to join in the bandwagon, then you get a worse case of cyberbullying online.
Right. I think the closest, not the closest, but this is somewhat reminding me, this whole week we had Ayin, who came forward and basically started the Make Schools Safer campaign. So in terms of that, in terms of teenagers wanting to be wanting to voice out their concerns, wanting to voice out, what's the changes that they can change in the social media platform. What advice would you actually give for students who possibly would want to stand up like Ayin, or want to bring about, social changes and social issues on social media, but they are obviously, under 18, still the care of their parents, and they don't want to kind of step over the line? What advice would you actually give them in terms of, voicing their opinions online and being online activists?
Number one, I fully agree with youngsters speaking up, because I see school children who are speaking up about issues that I myself saw when I was in school but never spoke up, either because we didn't realize it was wrong or because we felt that we couldn't. So those who are speaking up now, that's fantastic. But the only way for them to understand how not to step over the line is for them to actually know what the line is. So when you want to make accusations on social media, or you want to make claims on social media, you need to know what you can and cannot do, because there are laws which are in place. And laws offline are also applicable online. The firm extent of the law goes straight into social media as well. So you've got defamation laws, you've got the penal code, you've got every other, the Communications and Multimedia Act. So there needs to be a form of awareness and understanding. Equip yourself with the knowledge so that your social media posts are not then used against you. So that's also very important for us. The passion is great. I'm all for that. But that needs to come along with the knowledge and awareness of how far you can go to protect yourself.
Just a curious question, Mediha, before we end our interview, is it possible for any parents out there or any concerned adults, even teenagers, is it possible for them to approach the content forum in terms of maybe filing a complaint, maybe asking for advice? Is it possible?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the content forum is a forum for all. In fact, we organize a lot of awareness activities and dialogues with school children, with schools. We had a couple a few times talking about cybersecurity, talking about the kind of online scams that are out there that may be targeting teenagers. And it's very effective for schools to host this or even for parents to do so. And it's also important that, I mean, my kids know if they see content that they think shouldn't be there, they need to be able to use the report button or the block button. Similarly, I think self-regulation is a life skill. It's similar to swimming. You know, you don't put your child out there into the deep blue sea without teaching them how to swim.
Right.
So we need to equip our children who are digital natives, whose future really depends on the internet, to know what they can and cannot do and how to navigate the World Wide Web. So yes, parents, teachers, children, anyone, please feel free to come and approach the content forum. We'll be very happy to engage with you.
Exactly, and the website is simply cmcf.my. Thank you so much, Maria Mahmood, for being here. I mean, self-regulatory. I mean, wow. We've got to do some stuff also as well, right, Zoe?
Yeah, indeed. So thank you again, Maria. Hope you have a lovely Sunday. Now we're going to move on to something that is offline, which is meal.